All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am Matt Riggs. I'm the outreach coordinator for the MARC Solid Waste Management District. I coordinate the Food Loss and Waste Project, Waste Reduction Project here at MARC, and I'll also be facilitating today's workshop. For those of you just joined us, we're doing introductions via chat today, so please put your name, organization, and just a brief sentence about your interest in the topic so that your fellow attendees can get to know you a little bit better. And feel free to use the chat throughout the workshop if you have thoughts or questions. And what we're going to try to do is get to those. We're going to have a very brief Q&A session at the end. So because we're going to have a pretty full agenda through the workshop, so we'll be buzzing from one thing to the next. But hopefully we can get to all your questions and thoughts at the end. If we don't, we will respond to you just after the workshop. So let me give you a brief overview of our agenda today. We're going to start by defining the problem of food waste. I'm going to kind of give you an overview at the national level, and then we're going to have 4 presenters who work at the local level. Basically, they're out in the trenches every day doing this work, and each one of them is going to talk about a different topic. We're going to talk about prevention, rescue, compost, and climate change from the local level. After that, we're going to start looking at basically our pathway to solutions. I'll give an overview of the grant, which this whole project is based on, that we got from the EPA. And then I'm also going to give you a kind of a brief overview of how we see the work groups and workshops and the food waste action plan, kind of the work plan for the rest of this year, and how we hope you all will get involved and stay involved in that. And then we move on to our small group breakouts. So these are designed to basically further define and prioritize the areas for our upcoming small work group work, as well as what goes into the food waste action plan. And then we're going to share out after that 3 to 5 priorities that you come up with in those small groups. We'll have a share out with the whole group. And then we'll just do a quick closing, next steps, and then we'll answer any questions you may have. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everybody see that? Okay, good. So food waste. It is food loss and waste is a huge problem that hurts all of us. As I'm sure many of you know, it has an enormous negative impact on our community, economy, and the environment. But before we delve into the topic, I think we need to define our terms. So, basically, what do we mean when we're talking about food loss and waste? So there's a lot, as I did research for this, I realized there are a lot of definitions out there for these terms. Some of them line up with each other's, and others can almost be completely contradictory. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the definitions as established by the Environmental Protection Agency. So when we're talking about food loss and waste, food loss is usually defined as basically the unused product from the agricultural sector, such as unharvested crops. So for those of you with a recycling background, this is kind of the pre-consumer. This is before it reaches the consumer. Then food waste, that's the stuff like plate waste or spoiled food or inedible parts like peels and rinds. And that's kind of post-consumer or once the food is in someone's hands. And then another good definition that they emphasize at the EPA is excess food, which is defined as food that is recovered or donated to feed people. So those are kind of the definitions we're going to go with for now. And, I'm sure as this process goes on through this year, there'll be some other terms and stuff we need to clarify. But I just want to clarify that that's basically what we mean by food loss and waste. So how big is this problem? Well, let's start with sheer quantity. More than 30% of all food in the United States is wasted every day. That's 365 days a year, every year. That's basically enough to fill the Rose Bowl every day. So there's your Rose Bowl. So imagine that full of food, and that's what we've got. So where's all this food waste coming from? That's a big question, because a lot of people are like, well, I think it's from this sector or this sector. Well, this is where it's all laid out. So a majority of food waste, about approximately 39%, is coming from residential households. And if you look on the right side of your screen, that number increases to about 50% in Missouri and 56% in Kansas. The next biggest category is farm produce, and that's defined as fruits and vegetables. Now, that doesn't really apply to Missouri and Kansas because we're more crop producing states. We produce things like, corn, soybeans, wheat, that kind of stuff. So that category doesn't really apply to our area, though it definitely applies at the national level. So the next one down is food service. So that includes any place that prepares meals outside the home. So we're talking restaurants, school and hospital cafeterias, catering operations, et cetera. And this number goes from 20% at the national level to about 30% in Missouri and Kansas. Then at the lowest levels, we have retail, such as grocery stores, and manufacturing, such as like a baked goods company. So that's kind of where it's coming from in percentages. But where is it all going? Well, nationally, more than half of all this wasted food goes straight to the landfill. Anything outside that, the rest is basically incinerated, goes down the drain, or is simply left in the fields to rot. So a few more impactful statistics. U.S. households waste nearly 1/3 of the food that they buy every year. The annual cost of food waste for an individual U.S. household is about $1,866. Wasted food in the United States consumes 140 million acres of agricultural land annually. To give you a feel for the size of that, that's about the size of California and New York combined. So that's quite a lot. And in the US, wasted food uses up to 778 million pounds of pesticides and 14 billion pounds of fertilizer every year. Resources lost to food waste equal the annual water and energy usage of about 50 million US homes. And then every year, wasted food generates greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 42 coal-fired power plants. So we're talking greenhouse gases, climate warming gases. And all this is occurring while in 2020, 10.5%, which is roughly 13.8 million of US households, were food insecure. So this means that food insecure households, which are those with low and very low food security, had difficulty at some time during the year providing enough food for all their members because of lack of resources. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So that's the problem at the national level. So now we're going to hear from 4 local experts who, like I said, are out in the field doing this work in our metro area year-round. And they're going to give us their unique perspectives on 4 areas: prevention, rescue, compost, and climate change. So first up is Leanne Neal and Joan Levins. Leanne Neal is the Chief of Early Childhood Education and Sustainability for the Shawnee Mission School District. And Joan Levins was the previous Shawnee Mission School District Sustainability Coordinator and now spends a lot of her time volunteering with Climate Action KC. And they're going to talk about their successful food waste prevention efforts at their school district. So I'm going to share that screen. Make that a full thing here. All right, so Leanne and Joan, please feel free to take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. It's our pleasure to be invited and to be a part of the conversation and to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the Shawnee Mission School District, the work that was started first under Joan's leadership and her passion, and that I've now had the opportunity to work on continuing and collaborating with her. In terms of prevention, I think for us, we have the opportunity at the very young level of the education component. So that's what we're going to kind of share and talk a little bit about today. Matt, if you could go ahead and advance. And one more. So that slide here just gives you an indication for those of you who may not know, just a slight scope of the Shawnee Mission School District, the number of students that we serve, over 27,000. We also have the opportunity to serve 14 different cities or municipalities with 47 schools in the district, and then also facilities like our administrative center, the Center for Academic Achievement, and all of those facilities do recycle and compost. So Joan, you want to talk a little bit about how we started on establishing those priorities with student input?
Absolutely. In 2016, we invited our students to participate in a sustainability youth summit and to set priorities, sustainability priorities for the district. Leanne reconvened the students last October, and they reiterated that composting and recycling were among their top 5 priorities. And so that is why we as a district and have incorporated that into the strategic plan. It is a goal for the district, and it's also important to our students.
So some of those, it's interesting in Shawnee Mission, while the students have set and continued to reaffirm that that's really, really important, it was actually started as a grassroots effort in our school district by some of our patrons and students who were really passionate about making a difference. And so that sort of grassroots effort that sparked that conversation, and we actually then were able to expand it district-wide, has also caused us to sort of take a look at how some of our operational pieces are working. And so the important partners for us to be able to work with in our sustainability role certainly is our operations and maintenance team, our building custodians, as well as our food service team members who've come alongside and worked on looking differently at how we handle food waste and how we try to be proactive about that. Joan, you want to walk through some of those food logs and some of the things that were done early on?
Absolutely. I should point out that the food service back in 2007 eliminated styrofoam, and they also do a lot to reduce waste, solid waste, not just food. So the food waste reduction is an important part of what they do to reduce costs, to be as efficient as possible. So they keep food logs at each school, and that each school sort of may have a favorite food. For example, maybe pizza at one school, chicken nuggets may be the big hit at another school. It might be a breakfast for lunch at a third school. So each school tracks what food is used, and so that they can better order and what students will be eating in the next time that item comes around on the menu. Meals are prepared in school kitchens. That was an innovation that came about in around 2015, 14 and 15 or so. We had previously a warehouse that shipped the food out to the schools. We reinstated school kitchens. There now ingredients are drop shipped to each site, specifically what they needed. It reduces our transportation and labor costs. The menus are designed so that what isn't used one day can be incorporated into the next meal the next day. And I also have to say, I went through all of the schools to help them sort of reestablish composting if it was underway, or to establish it if it had not been going on in that school. And at first we put these large bins in the kitchens and realized that just took up space. They literally came out with a single tray of leftover food, a small tray, and would dump that in the compost. So food service really has to be applauded for the work that they do to be very efficient in reducing food loss. I also have to say that at one point, people were asking us, well, how about if you invite harvesters to come and collect leftover food? And when I contacted harvesters, we were told there's not enough, Shawnee Mission doesn't waste enough, or there's not enough leftover food to make it worthwhile for harvesters to collect that and redistribute it.
And if you could advance to the next slide. So one of the key pieces, and I think Joan just touched on that, is really the educational piece around reducing the waste before it gets there. And so one of the changes in helping students really become their own advocates and consumers that I witnessed is that the kitchens, back when we were in school, we just sort of got those trays and they were preset, regardless of what your desires would be. And so now there's a real effort to allow students to take what they want to sort of self-serve, but with that message around take what you want, but make sure that you're thinking about eating what you take. And they also do a great job of helping students understand what they need to take, what's required, because food service does have some requirements, but they need only to choose items from 3 of the 5 food groups. And they actually have done a great job. You'll see in a minute in the video of actually helping them understand those portions by having servingware that really helps with that message too. They also instituted prior to the pandemic, they were doing some share tables. There have been some adjustments with the pandemic that we've had to make based on safety and also some of the supply chain issues. But that was another way for students to be able to share clean, unopened items that could be put out to benefit others or to be given to the nurse's office, so that students, if they needed food, they could go. They knew they could always get that there, but it also helped us protect with some food allergy components as well. Joan, you want to talk a little bit about how the video was created, and then we'll ask Matt to play it?
Sure. The U.S. Green Building Council selected schools across the nation to pilot student-led projects and sustainability. And one of the teachers at Briarwood Elementary stepped up and decided to work with her second graders. And this is the project that Zero Food Waste Challenge is the project that they chose. And Matt, the students in our communications department put together this video. If you click on the photo on the right, sorry, yeah, that should be the link. Thank you.
Matt, we're not getting any audio out of your computer.
This is just an example of the fresh fruits and vegetables the students are served. This was not staged. This was what was being served for lunch that day. It turned out to be great options.
And the little scoop that she just showed was that portion of the half cup for the fruits that they need to take.
This just goes through what goes in each of the bins.
And one of the keys that we've done is visuals for the students. So not only the signage on those bins, but you can see there the little poster behind, really helping students get that as they're learning the process, easy visuals for them to be able to walk up and know exactly which of those bins they successfully need to put each item in. All right. So Matt, if you want to stop it, since we can't really hear, we'll just go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right. It's
Sometimes
not,
it works, sometimes it doesn't.
It does, but I think it gives you a sense of that we're working, the students are really passionate, and I think that's the message that came out in the summit. And the interesting piece is Joan shared that we started this in 2016 with the first setting of those priorities. When we brought the students back, these high school students back in this last fall, they were very passionate about and very honest about that at the high school level. They weren't maybe not as vigilant about following the food waste and the composting, and they really felt like that was something that they wanted to be a part of working to bring back. And so that's our plan, is to kind of kickstart and jumpstart that. At the elementary level, we have some supports with staff members, but at the high school level, it really, I think, we feel like to be successful needs to be led by a team of student ambassadors. And so that's really kind of our next wave of where we plan to go to continue that, as well as building these important components into seeing where they match in our curriculum so that students can learn about that as it connects with our standards. Joan, you want to conclude for us?
We thank you for inviting us, and I think there's probably not an opportunity for questions, but we welcome hearing from all of you. All new ideas are always welcomed.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Leanne and Joan. You guys are doing great stuff, and I think that's a wonderful illustration of things on the prevention side, getting it at its source. So next up is our next speaker is going to be Karen Siebert from Harvesters Community Food Network. Karen is Harvesters Advocacy and Public Policy Advisor, and she's going to talk about the challenges and opportunities surrounding food recovery in the metro area. So Karen, you are up.
All right, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yes, I'm with Harvesters, and I think probably most people know who we are, but I want to give you a little bit of background on sort of what we do on a daily basis. We are the Feeding America Food Bank, serving the food insecure in Northeast Kansas and Northwest Missouri. And we do that, excuse me, through a food bank, a food network of more than 760 nonprofit food pantries, kitchens, and shelters throughout a 26 county area. But by way of background, Harvesters was founded as a partnership between the faith community and the business community. In the late 1970s, nutritious food was being thrown in landfills while people were going hungry and turning to their local churches for help. Faith leaders went to grocers and asked if they would donate their excess food rather than throwing it away. They agreed, but said that they needed the community to set up a system through which they could donate that food, and food banking in Kansas City was born. Harvesters was initially established as that connecting point between the food industry and our charitable food pantries. In its first year, Harvesters distributed 155,000 pounds of food to those in need. Fast forward more than 40 years to 2021, and we collected and distributed more than 71 million pounds of food to meet the needs of the food insecure in our community. As Matt mentioned, he asked me to share some challenges and opportunities facing food recovery in the KC Metro. So here are just a few from Harvesters' perspective. Food banking is really changing from the traditional shelf-stable food model of cans in a church food pantry that are available should someone have an emergency situation. We're sort of shifting from that shelf-stable food model to providing more fresh produce and refrigerated and frozen foods. Last year, more than a third of the food that we provided to our network was fresh produce. It's what our food insecure neighbors want and they need, and it's available. So that's not really the challenge. It really is an opportunity for us. But this shift to fresh foods is also expensive because it requires refrigeration, not only at the food bank, but also on our trucks and at our member agencies. It requires a much quicker turnaround time for our food donations. So if we get a shipment of strawberries that's already distressed, we can't wait until a local pantry opens 2 days later to get that out. We have to get that food in the hands of our neighbors as soon as possible. That asks more of our member agencies and requires more of a just-in-time distribution approach, which can be costly. And it requires investments all the way down the line. we talk about the last mile at Harvesters, because even if Harvesters has refrigerated storage and refrigerated trucks, if we're taking the food to agencies that don't, that food won't last. So those are some of the issues we work with there. Another challenge is the environmental impact. We don't want to trade one environmental problem for another. Our distribution model works at a large scale. It doesn't necessarily work when you have 4 sandwiches to donate. It's not environmentally or fiscally sound to send a large truck to pick up such a small donation. These are situations when localized donations are probably more appropriate. And then the issue of prepared food. When many people think about food waste and excess food, they often think about events and caterers and restaurants where it looks like perfectly good food is going to waste. There are some key challenges to keep in mind, though, when it comes to prepared food, which we have collected for years, decades at Harvesters, but it is very challenging. First of all, plate waste. As Matt mentioned, there is a lot of plate waste, and we can't do anything with that food. Any food that has gone out of the kitchen cannot be donated. Plate waste may be a food waste issue, but it isn't a food recovery issue. And food safety, that will always be an issue with prepared foods. We need to have confidence that the foods were kept warm or cold and handled appropriately. We serve many medically fragile people, and we cannot risk them getting sick from the food they receive from us. And distribution, even if we can recover the food, we really don't have that many kitchens operating in the metro to distribute it to. They don't want to take just 1 pan of green beans when they need to feed 80 people. They want to provide the same food for everyone and not have a situation where the first ones in line get different food or better food or whatever than the rest. So for them, it's really an equity issue and how we can utilize those foods. And then timing. Food from events and restaurants is often available for donation late at night and on weekends when many of our agencies are closed, or they simply don't have the volunteers or staff available to accept food donations in those late off hours, and certainly not without any notice. There are many opportunities available to increase food donations and take advantage of some of that excess food that is out there. Policies that increase tax donations available to producers and retailers for donating food can incentivize them to make those donations. It takes a producer, a retailer, more time to arrange to find a storage place for food until Harvesters can get there to pick it up, and make sure they have the storage capacity. They've got to have staff to pull out that food and that kind of thing. It's quite honestly quicker to just throw it away. And so we need to incentivize retailers to take that extra time and invest those extra resources to rescue that food. Policy standardizing things like best buy dates, expiration dates, safe food handling requirements would be helpful. We have varying policies on those from municipality to county to state to federal. So anything we can do to standardize that, to decrease confusion about those kinds of things would be really helpful. And there also are farm to food bank programs that have been established in other states, usually through state legislatures. And those provide resources to producers who may have food that's left in the field or in the barns, and help them with harvesting, processing, and shipping costs so that they can get those food to food banks. Similar to the situation on the retail side, it costs money to recover that food, and anything we can do to help those farmers recoup that investment would be helpful. But really a more personal policy, I think, rather than systematizing all of these donations, is just to look around you. In some cases, it may be most appropriate to share leftover food with coworkers and other staff, friends, or family. If you're at an event, considering that 1 in 8 people in our region are food insecure, chances are you're interacting with someone who's food insecure every single day. And the best thing may just to help feed your neighbors that are right beside you. So those are just a few of the issues, and I look forward to answering any questions at the appropriate time, and then having further discussions in the breakout sessions.
Thank you, Karen. That's wonderful, wonderful presentation. There's, as you can see, there are many, many issues to talk about, and we're just scratching the surface today, but thank you, Karen. Next up is Mr. Stan Slaughter. Stan is the Director of Education and Outreach for Missouri Organic Recycling, and he's going to talk about food waste from the composting perspective. So Stan, take it away, please.
Oh, thanks, Mac. Wanted to give you just a little bit of background about Missouri Organic. We're a 28-year-old company with 106 employees. We're owned by the Anderson family. We have the public-private partnership with the city of Kansas City, where we collect the yard waste from the city. We have a main facility near the Royal Stadium. We have 3 drop-off and retail locations in Kansas City, Missouri. There's 1 in Kansas. We also have a bagging plant and a composting facility, and the last 2 are not open to the public. We process the leaves from Kansas City, Missouri, and most of surrounding metro. We collect most of the metro's woody waste and sell it as mulch. And also now between 20 and 40 tons of food waste a day. Our food waste collection started in 2005, and now we have 300 customers from Lawrence to Hutchinson to Warrensburg to St. Joseph. So it's truly a metro-wide collection. At this point, our capacity is almost fully subscribed for food waste. Because we reject 16% of the total food waste as contamination, plastic and cardboard, using our Tiger depackager, we're able to produce high quality compost without the plastic making it through the process. This rejected plastic and wet cardboard are mixed with pulverized wood pellets and sent to a cement kiln as refuse-derived fuel. This is a zero waste to landfill disposal method, and it is a premium designation, and it ensures that waste brokers want to use our service. We estimate that we're receiving about 8% of the metro's food waste. And to raise this total, we're working with other area communities to see how our facilities could be placed around the metro for more efficient transport and delivery. In order to make further strides towards reducing food waste to landfill, we need to increase food and yard waste collection and build more facilities. And these are, of course, very capital intensive. COVID took away the restaurant and food and school collection network we had built, but that's actually coming back fairly rapidly. Costs for our customers depend on if our trucks are loaded at the client's location or if the client hauls the material to us. We also offer power washing of the pallets and the trucks themselves as a value-added service. Tipping fees for our food waste vary from about $85 a ton to up to $130 a ton. Transportation is a major cost factor and now is becoming a bigger concern. Missouri Organic has built its business around using rich food waste to make fertile compost. Going forward, we will be challenged to keep our service convenient and affordable. Missouri Organic offers a strong outreach and education program. We attend local events. We sponsored the recent Compost Fest, the upcoming Eat Local Food Expo, and the Brookside Farmers Market. We donate approximately $70,000 worth of compost and mulch each year to churches and community gardens all over the metro. Our social media consultant produces a steady stream of short informational segments on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My partner, Katie White, and I are currently servicing our second $35,000 grant from KDHE to provide compost education for 100 schools in Kansas each year. This is a very innovative program that has written relevant state science standards into 4 compost lessons, and we produced 4 accompanying videos on YouTube so teachers can watch there. Food Too Good to Waste has been very popular and is making headway across the local Missouri side schools also. That's the fire hose. There's a lot to talk about, and I'll be looking forward for your questions and going further. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. All right. Last but not least, we have going to talk about climate change. Mr. Tom Jacobs. Tom's the Environmental Programs Director here at MARC, and he's going to talk about the impact of food waste has on climate change, and especially those impacts felt here in the Midwest. So Tom, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to get to share a couple of thoughts with everybody today and to follow each of the previous speakers. Everybody's just doing such phenomenal work. As you all might recall, at the beginning or towards the end of 2019, we started working on a regional climate action plan that was endorsed and adopted by our board of directors just about a year ago. And there's north of a dozen different communities that have formally adopted that plan since that time. And it's just created a huge amount of energy, and our intention is to energize and put wind in the sails of everybody doing great work, including on food waste. The plan addresses other topics like renewable energy and energy efficiency and transportation, but it turns out, as Matt indicated before, that at a global level, food waste contributes about 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. And according to the book Drawdown, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it. If not, take a look at drawdown.org. If we were to reduce the amount of food waste globally by 50% or so, we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 90 to 100 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents, which is, you know, the global emissions inventory would probably be about 50 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year. So we're talking about just massive potential for emissions and benefits in many regards. Drawdown lists all kinds of different climate solutions that are specifically related to food. They include food waste and conservation tillage and agroforestry and coastal wetland protection and irrigation efficiency and plant-rich diets and more. I think 8 of the top 20 items are food related. It's interesting, in the emissions inventory that we did for our regional climate action plan, food doesn't really show up, but it's an accounting problem. Some of these benefits accrue outside of our specific area. When you take a whole systems approach, looking at production, storage, processing, packaging, transport, consumption, disposal, right? There's across the whole life cycle of food production, there's emissions along the way that are very substantial. I had fun digging back into carbon and nitrogen cycling to try and think about some of these emissions on the production side. And I think we probably understate what some of these emissions might be. As we till the soil, we oxidize carbon. And that oxidation process has profound implications, right? And so it takes us down into the world of regenerative agriculture and agroforestry and conservation tillage and all of that. The fertilizer production, the statistic that Matt showed earlier, is just alarming, right? The nitrification of nitrogen in the soil through conventional agricultural processes is an incredible source of greenhouse gas emissions that has massive impacts. So I just wanted to put this sort of in a global systems context to start. Our climate plan talks about urban food systems and food waste in a few different ways. We focus on local food systems and on carbon sequestration. So we're talking about the adaptation side and the mitigation side. On local food systems, it's been extraordinary how much growth there's been in the urban agricultural sector in our community, and thinking about how we grow local and waste less and tie all of that work to food security is really important. And at the same time, there's a strong equation, not just between food waste and food security, as we've been talking about, but also between food waste and urban food systems and land stewardship. So as we apply compost to the soil, right, we're creating jobs, we're reducing methane emissions, we're enhancing soil water holding capacity, we're increasing soil organic matter content, and we're boosting the agricultural productivity of that land to feed people. So there's huge opportunities to make a difference there. The plan looks at policy issues related to planning and zoning that can be supportive of urban agriculture. So there's profound linkages between food waste and climate protection. And these are all things that we can explore more. Mark is in this right now, and the next step on our climate action plan is to form a climate and environment council at Mark, a new policy committee. We're inviting applications for participation in that community. We're hoping to have a very diverse group of folks, and would invite all of you to apply. I can post a link to that application in a couple of minutes. It's very brief and simple to fill out. And then the last thing I might want to mention is that on Saturday, April 9th, we're hosting a second Climate Summit. Climate Action KC is sponsoring that event. It will be held at Johnson County Community College in the afternoon, and it's going to be an absolutely terrific program. One of the, among the many cool things that will happen that day and in the week preceding is we're going to have north of 15 different delegations from around the United States and Europe, and who are going to come to Kansas City, and we'll be sharing a lot of information about the work that's going on. So we're part of a global movement, and we're engaged, and we're trying to make a difference. And this work here today is absolutely a fundamental part of all of that. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So kind of have it now, kind of what the problems and the issues are at both the national level and the local level. So what we need to do now is find out, okay, well, so what can we do about all this? So I'm going to reshare my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, so so basically, what can we do to solve all these issues? Well, it's important to understand that we're not starting from scratch, for one thing, and we're definitely not alone. The EPA, among many other organizations around the country and world, has been basically tackling food waste and loss recovery for many years. Pictured here is their food waste recovery hierarchy, which is kind of the Rosetta Stone of the food loss and waste realm. Everything is kind of based off this in terms of actions to take. But it prioritizes actions organizations can take to prevent and divert wasted food. Each tier of the hierarchy focuses on different management strategies. So the top levels of the hierarchy are your best ways to prevent and divert wasted food because they create the most benefits for the environment, society, and the economy. So the food waste recovery or food recovery hierarchy is kind of what we base all of our work on. So I just want to present that to let you know that the ball is definitely rolling. So here's basically how we're going to start down the pathway to coming up with solutions to these problems. On September 30th, 2021, the EPA officially awarded the Mid-America Regional Council one of their sustainable materials management grants for approximately $175,000 to address food loss and waste. It's a 2-year grant with the goal of reducing the amount of food that is wasted and sent to landfills in the Kansas City metro area. The grant project is being guided by a project advisory committee that is made up of the 21 organizations you see here. They include cities and counties, food policy groups, producers, processors, distributors, commercial and industrial buyers, the organics management industry, and food recovery groups. The grant takes a very holistic field to fork, otherwise known as cradle to consumer approach, addressing food waste wherever it is created along the food supply chain. So at each link in this chain, it's going to consider the following strategies: prevention, rescue, and composting. So that's a theme that's going to keep coming up here. The project has 3 goals: develop a food waste action plan, develop a web-based food system map, and develop and implement a food waste education campaign. The food waste action plan is anticipated to address all of the following. It's going to describe the existing conditions of food loss and waste prevention, rescue, and food scrap recycling in the community. It's going to establish both short and long-term targets to reduce the amount of food going to waste and develop a plan for ongoing measurement. It's going to recommend policy and program actions that have the greatest potential to have a positive impact on food loss and waste reduction in the region. And last but not least, it will definitely ensure that the diverse cultural, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds of the region's residents are represented both in its development and in the implementation of food waste strategies. The project is also developing a website to facilitate food loss and waste reduction among organizations, stakeholders, and community members. And it's going to do this through three major components: a directory, a mapping system, and a communication platform. So a couple examples of how this map might work. So let's say a corporate event has a lot of catered food left over and needs to find the nearest food pantry to donate it before it spoils. Well, this map would help them do that. Let's say a high school student needs service hours and wants to find the nearest food bank that offers volunteer opportunities. They could find that information here. Or let's say an elected official wants to understand how food waste is being dealt with in the KC metro area. This would give them that information as well. And then the third goal of the project is to develop a strategic education plan. The goal of the plan is basically to raise awareness about food waste, provide food waste reduction information, and drive people to the website that I just spoke about. It's going to be very similar to the Natural Resources Defense Council Save the Food campaign pictured here, which in this campaign basically showcases the life cycle of food and the loss of resources when it goes unconsumed. So as you can see, the project through those three goals alone encompasses a lot, but it does have its limitations. It is a 2-year grant. It's not endless. And there's a few of the limitation areas that I wanted to point out just so everybody can understand what the grant is going to be able to do and what it can't do. And the first has to do with food waste and versus the food system. So the goal of this grant is to reduce the amount of food waste sent to landfills in the Kansas City metro area. So that's pretty narrow. The goal of it is not to improve and expand all aspects of our local food system and address all the issues and all the problems in that system. It's just, it doesn't have that scope. But that said, after the grant period, we can definitely expand kind of our scope and incorporate a broader range of stakeholders and issues that need addressing as part of the region's sustainable food system. So we definitely see this growing and expanding over time. But during the grant, we have to focus on fulfilling our grant obligation. So I just want to let you know that it is a very broad, grant, but it does have its limits. Another thing has to do with measurement. So this grant will develop a plan for measuring the amount of food wasted in the metro area, but it's not actually going to provide statistics on the food wasted in the metro area. So it's going to provide a plan for how those need to be, what needs to be collected and how it needs to be collected, but it's not going to actually provide those statistics at the end of this grant. And then in terms of policy and program recommendations, they are strictly that. It will recommend these policy and program actions for food waste reduction in the region. However, implementation of these policies and programs will be up to the entities to which the recommendations have been made. So, so that's just kind of give you a sense of kind of the boundaries of our grant. So in terms of what happens after today's workshop, you may be asking, what's the next steps? So if you are interested and available to stay involved in this project, we would love to have you throughout the rest of 2022. And basically what that looks at is after today, we see through the kind of the April and May time period, putting together a few small work groups. And those work groups are really going to get down into the weeds and refine the components of what you all think is absolutely vital to have in the food waste action plan. So that would basically mean you would meet, once or twice throughout the April and May timeframe, and work at things at a more detailed level, get to know some of the people better involved in this effort, et cetera. Then we project doing workshop number 2 sometime in June, where we will actually present and rank the findings and the work of the small groups that they've been doing. And then over the summertime period, basically Mark's staff and the project advisory committee will put together a draft of the food waste action plan based on the small work group work and what comes out of the second workshop. And then we'll have a third workshop in September, where we'll basically present and discuss a final draft of the food waste action plan. And then we're hoping, not guaranteeing, but we're hoping to release the final plan sometime in the fourth quarter of 2022. So that's just kind of an overview of the grant and the workshop series, which are both obvious pathways to finding the solutions to all these issues we've already spoken about. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So next up on our agenda is our small group breakout sessions. First off, I want to thank everyone. When you signed up, when you registered for this workshop, hopefully you filled out a survey. We got, I think, about 37 responses, which is excellent. You guys provided a lot of great information, a lot of success stories, but also a greater amount of challenges. But you had some wonderful ideas, resources, and other efforts going on around the rest of the country that we can pull ideas and make connections with. So we mentioned drinking through a fire hose. There's a lot of information on this survey, and I want to make sure that when I send it back to you, that it's in a more succinct and digestible format. So I'm still working on kind of condensing it down to the basic elements and getting all the responses on there in a more readable format. So that will be something that I will send out to you post workshop. But I think basically you can look at the survey as kind of a broader set of questions, which kind of gets you thinking about in that frame of mind of what are the opportunities and challenges that we're facing with food loss and waste in our metro area. So it's kind of more the macro level. So that said, now we're going to dive into more of the micro level by breaking into our small group. So the purpose of the small group exercise is to help further define and prioritize the focus areas for two areas for our upcoming small work groups work in April and May, and then also for defining better what do we really think absolutely has to be included in the food waste action plan. So basically what we're going to do is divide you into 7 groups. You're going to have about 10 people in each. Each one of these groups is going to be led by a trained facilitator. You'll have about 25 minutes in the room. We've given a list of kind of guidepost questions for the facilitators to utilize. But we want this to be a free, open, organic exchange. So if it goes off on a tangent, as long as it's related to food waste and getting us to our ultimate goal, we're fine with that. So we'll be broken out for about 25 minutes. And then when we get back from that, we'll have about a 10-minute share out session. And what we'll be doing is asking each of the groups to share 3 to 5 priority areas that really rose to the top of your discussion. So each group, if you just want to think about designated presenter, it could be the facilitator or somebody else in your group who's going to present those 3 to 5. That would be awesome. And so facilitators, please remember when you go in your rooms to hit the record button so we have a record of what was said and discussed in there. And apart from that, I think, Joe, it's time for you to take it away.
Okay, and we'll also be sending a message to everybody about the 1-minute warning mark so you can wrap up discussions.
Okay, so we have less time than I thought we would. We have about 5 minutes left till 10:30. So let's try to get through this as quickly as we can. I'm just going to call out one of the facilitators, and if you want to give your groups 3 to 5 priority areas, that would be wonderful. Brandon, are you ready to go for your group?
Sure, yeah. We just got, I think someone was talking when they, of course, but we had pretty good, robust discussion. And if anyone's on the group on here and you want to, if I'm missing something, please feel free to go ahead and unmute. But some of our priorities we discussed. I mean, we had pretty robust discussion, so I'll share these notes, of course, so you can use them in the future. but we had discussions on prioritizing local markets and local farmers, and there's some pretty good success stories underneath that, from KC Canned Compost, from After the Harvest and Brookside Farmers Market, kind of some of the stuff they're doing. That's just to name a few. It's not all of them, but then also another thing is maybe trying to look into small farmers compensation, maybe through the USDA, something like that. That was a topic. And then potential grants for other actions, kind of like after the harvest type efforts. And then education training of the community, just kind of in general. And with that related to planning for local farming efforts, it might be urban, micro-focused, that type of thing. So yeah, those are some of the main topics we were talking about, of course, a lot more in depth. So, and then some of the things we missed, maybe trying to look at technology and transportation concerns regarding. So
Great. Thanks, Brandon.
Mhm.
Those are all great points. A lot of them I hadn't even thought of yet. So we obviously have a lot of work to do. Jennifer Morris, are you ready to go next?
Yes, I am. We had a great group. We had a robust conversation, which I forgot to press the record button on, but I took extensive notes. So I'll be typing those up for you. And then I did press record about midway through. So we do have that recorded about halfway. We had a great, robust conversation and came with our 3 priorities at the end. Our education and that's broadly for everybody, you know, residences, for governments, for farmers, education, broad education, communication, again, at all levels, communication with the community, communication across and among the groups that are working in these areas, and communication with the governments, and identifying gaps. So using the tools that we have, maybe it's that interactive map that Mark is developing, maybe it's something else, but using the tools that are maybe part of this project to identify some gaps and then develop projects to fill those gaps. There are some amazing things going on in Kansas City and a lot to be proud of.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Let's see who's next on our list here. Katie Howard, you ready to go?
I am. Let me start off by saying that 25 minutes was not enough time for us. We have some passionate folks who are doing a lot of great work and have some wonderful ideas. So I don't think there'll be a lack of things to put in your plan, Matt. Anyway, kind of taking the conversation and trying to round it into 3 general ideas. One that we talked about a lot was the way that food can bring people together. You know, you kind of think about natural divides that happen in the community, whether it's the North and South or the East and West or different parts of communities. But if you actually kind of tap into what makes those communities unique and different, you can actually find ways to bring them together with food. And also just thinking about ways to use food to bring you know, different groups together, and even the ideas of like how family meals or community meals or meals at a church, you know, kind of that potluck idea of bringing people together. So really using it as a way to take away the divides and create togetherness through food. Another is just the general lack of understanding of the scale of the food waste issue. And really talking about how there needs to be clarity and respect for the issue in order to help get leaders on board to really prioritize this at all different levels of organizations. And then the third idea was one that we've heard from the other two groups already, is the need for education and really the food literacy. And this kind of ranges everything. We talked a lot about students and thinking about kind of helping students with real life kind of food waste thoughts and issues, you know, from the time that they're growing up in the school system, but then also continuing education and thinking about how we expand that on so that people don't forget to keep prioritizing it. So those were the kind of three things I summarized from our conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. It is 10:31 now, so we are at our time. If you need to leave, please feel free to go. If you can stay for a few more minutes to hear from our other groups, that's awesome. If you need to leave, I will be in touch with everybody who's in attendance today to kind of share some resources and share our next steps. Hopefully you all want to stay involved. But so if you are leaving right now, thank you very much for coming today. You've been great. It's been great to have you here, and we look forward to working with you in the near future. Okay, so Cassandra, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go, and I will echo Katie's comment that 20 minutes was definitely not enough. We also had a very robust group of very passionate individuals. So I'll just kind of highlight a couple of things, be really quick, on top of the organizations that we already heard of, you know, Harvesters, Missouri Organics, and things like that. We also had Stan on our group, and he mentioned our local food network that we are actually about to enter the 30th year of the local food expo. So that's good to hear that there's been some longevity with that. As far as where we need to go and how we get there, we'd like to see more curbside collection. We know there's a couple organizations in the region that do curbside collection. We just like to see more of that. Stan also mentioned a kiosk drop-off option. I guess there's in the city of Minneapolis, there's a 1% contamination ratio with this, which is just incredible. So maybe exploring with that. And then we also had Brandon Hamilton, who is the Vice President of Stadium Operations and Facilities with the Kansas City Chiefs on our team, encouraging people to leave their trash behind in the bowl after the game is over so the staff can sort it. So that was interesting to me because I mean, I would think that you would want people to throw their trash away, but if they're going to throw it away in the wrong bin, then that just creates another level of, you know, needing to sort it and things like that. So really just that. And I think we talked about before, you know, consistency in messaging and marketing. If we keep on keeping on, people will catch on and perspectives will shift. So.
Thank you, Cassandra. All right, Donna Martin, you ready to go?
Yeah. Okay, so we also had a lot of similar discussion that other groups have had. We identified a wonderful wealth of resources and things that are and efforts that are going on currently. And so one of our big pushes was, though, that there seems to also be a lack of awareness that all those wonderful resources are out there. So obviously marketing, education, raising awareness that needs to happen. And that kind of would come out of mapping those resources as well. So making sure that we have all the local resources identified in that map or the directory that gets created. Also doing an assessment of local policies, ordinances, programs, partnerships that exist in the communities in our area. So assessing those and then looking for maybe a way to create like a toolbox of model policies or model partnerships that are out there, really encouraging those communities that that we determine have less friendly ordinances or policies regarding composting or other ways of food reduction, maybe to kind of provide them with information that might change those policies. Doing case studies to highlight all these interesting projects is also another idea that we had. And then the last one of what should be included in the food waste action plan is kind of all the different stages from field to fork. So not focusing just on composting or one or the other, but like how can we not waste food in the first place? Not bring food in, that's unnecessary into the system in the first place. So that's what we talked about.
Thank you, Donna. All right, Tom Jacobs, are you ready to go?
I sure am. Thanks. We had a fantastic group. I don't want to repeat many of the things that have already been said. There's some redundancy, of course. One thing that we spoke a little bit about that I haven't heard mentioned yet has to do with policy, municipal policy about the disposal of food waste, thinking about municipal infrastructure creation, reaching out to homeowner associations and policies there. There's a lot there to chew on. I thought I might just share a few of the things that were creative or new to me that I hadn't heard before. In Springfield, they are dehydrating food, excess food, and feeding it to folks who are unhoused. At the same time, they have a jobs training program to process food, turning it into jam or salsa or other things, again, focused on the unhoused population. Johnson County Community College has an in-vessel composter. Wichita takes excess food and shares it with animals at the zoo. We had a lot of conversation about taking excess food or food waste and providing it to animals. That led us to a conversation on chickens. Thinking about getting brewery scraps to farmers, writing up a cookbook for, with weird recipes that help us use excess food, thinking about soldier flies as a source of high value protein for animal feed. So these are all things that I had never thought about before, and I thought they were fun and creative and might be good contributions.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, last but not least, Tara Markley, you ready to step up to bat?
Sure, thank you. I'm thinking about how our Master Food volunteers can do a fun food waste cooking session. Challenge accepted. I like that one. Thank you all again. Wasn't enough time, but really that building up the infrastructure that's already in place. So, and connecting those pieces. And I think that's what the goal of the mapping and that piece of it, the education and also the policy. But I want to go back to education. One of the things that, not to reiterate, but was around volunteers. And so talking about several of our groups are so dependent upon volunteers, and really that's great, but how do we create more sustainability with, we need to pay someone to organize this, and how can we build more capacity into that system? But also not only those volunteers, but then those end users at the food pantries, and making sure that folks know what to do with pears, and having that cultural sensitivity of, if we're bringing all these collard greens, do you know what to do with those collard greens? And so that educational side on that realm of what to actually do with the food once you have it, I think was one that I haven't heard yet from folks. So, but everything else, we agree, and we mentioned. If I left anything out that you want group, put it in the chat.
Thank you, Tara. All right, well, we're about 10 minutes over, so I don't want to take any more of your time. I do apologize for it running long, but I appreciate all of you sticking around and hearing what these groups came up with. We're all drinking from the fire hose right now. There's so many great things that we need to think about and do, but that was really the whole point of this first workshop, was to serve as an introduction to the topic, to get everybody on the same page, to get the ideas swirling, to help start making the connections. So I do want to especially thank our presenters today and our facilitators. We couldn't have done it without you, or certainly couldn't have done near as good a job without your expertise and professionalism. So thank you very much for coming today. In terms of next steps, I will be in touch with everyone. I will send an email out with sharing resources, feedback, other things from this workshop. And I really hope that everyone is planning on staying involved in this effort through the rest of 2022, joining a small work group, coming to the workshops, seeing the plan through to the end, because the more voices at the table, I think the better this is going to be. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll be in touch. Thank you.